Dear seasoned friends, welcome to True Story 102. In our next episode, we share the gripping journey of a devoted military officer, a father whose courage and sacrifice were tested by deep betrayal and hidden secrets. So grab a warm cup of tea, sit back, and get ready for a story that bridges the past and present, reminding us that true honor and resilience shine through life as tough as trials. Please comment below with your location and share your thoughts. Stay healthy and enjoy the show. The heavy oak door creaked open as Captain John Morgan stepped into his darkened home. The familiar scent of lemon polish, now tainted with something wrong, revealed that 8 months overseas had sharpened his instincts right now. Every nerve in his body screamed that something was terribly amiss. The house stood silent, too silent for a Saturday morning when his family should be bustling about. "Linda, Carter, Madison." His deep voice echoed through the empty hallway. There was no response, only the hollow tick of the grandfather clock his late wife Emily had loved so much. Then, almost imperceptibly, a whimper his combat-trained ears caught it immediately, coming from the kitchen. Moving swiftly, his heart pounded against his ribs. John reached the kitchen door, which was locked. What kind of house locks its kitchen door? His hands trembled as he found his key ring. One twist, and the truth he was about to discover would shatter everything he believed about family, trust, and the people we leave behind. "Daddy," came a faint voice from inside. "Is it really you?" The voice of his 15-year-old daughter, Madison, sounded different, broken, afraid. As the door swung open, the sight before him stopped his heart. His precious daughter, his only connection to Emily, was rising from a thin mattress on the cold kitchen floor. Her eyes were filled with tears and fear. This wasn't the homecoming he had imagined. This was the beginning of a nightmare that would unravel everything he thought he knew about the family he'd left behind. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now, let us continue with the story. Captain John Morgan was born into wealth, but he was rich in principles. At 42, his weathered face told the story of a man who had served his country proudly for 2 decades, earning decorations that hung modestly in his home office. Yet the most precious medal he'd ever received was the small, heart-shaped locket his late wife Emily had given him before she passed away during Madison's birth 15 years ago. For 5 years, John raised Madison alone, balancing military duties with bedtime stories, deployment preparations with dance recitals. Their bond grew unshakable, forged in the quiet moments when he'd brush her hair just as Emily had shown him, and in the proud afternoons watching her excel at science fairs. Madison inherited her mother's golden hair and determination, but her eyes were all John's deep blue pools that seemed to carry wisdom beyond her years. Then, Linda Carter entered their lives, a divorced mother of 2 boys. She seemed to understand the delicate balance of grief and hope that defined the Morgan household. Her sons, Jay and Kyle, appeared to be well-adjusted teenagers despite their own father's abandonment. Jay, now 17, showed a protective instinct toward his younger siblings, while 14-year-old Kyle shared Madison's passion for academics. The marriage 10 years ago had felt like a second chance at happiness for everyone. Yet, Linda's transformation from the warm, understanding woman who'd won John's heart to the person who would betray his trust so profoundly remained a mystery that would haunt him. She'd been a school counselor, known for her empathy and insight into troubled teens. Her own boys had thrived under her care, making the current situation even more bewildering. The family photos that lined the hallway told a story of holiday gatherings, shared laughter, and what appeared to be genuine love, a carefully constructed facade that crumbled before his latest deployment. John had believed he'd built something beautiful from the ashes of his grief. He had no way of knowing that his absence would trigger a chain of events that would test not only his family's bonds, but also the very meaning of loyalty, trust, and forgiveness. The kitchen's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Madison's makeshift bedroom. Captain John Morgan stood frozen, his military training failing him in the face of this domestic horror. A thin mattress lay in the corner, surrounded by carefully arranged school books and a small battery-operated reading lamp. The sight of his daughter's neatly folded clothes, stacked in plastic bins, made his stomach turn. She'd been living like this for months, adapting to circumstances no child should ever face. "How long?" John's voice cracked as he knelt beside Madison, who was now clutching his uniform jacket as if she might disappear. The question hung heavy in the air, mixing with the lingering scent of microwave dinners and cleaning supplies since March. Madison whispered her words, barely audible. "When you stopped writing." She pulled away slightly, reaching under her mattress to retrieve a bundle of envelopes tied with a faded blue ribbon. "Linda said you weren't writing anymore because you'd found a new family overseas. But I knew you wouldn't do that, Daddy." John's hands trembled as he examined the unopened letters, each bearing his distinctive handwriting. Every week, without fail, he'd written to his daughter, sharing stories of his deployment, asking about her studies, and reminding her of his love. The postmarks told their own story. Linda had systematically intercepted every letter for the past 6 months. The reality of this situation began to crystallize. This was a simple case of family discord or stepmother-stepdaughter tension. This was calculated cruelty, a methodical dismantling of a child's world. The kitchen calendar on the wall caught his eye, dates marked with small red X's. Upon closer inspection, he realized they corresponded with Linda's weekend trips with the boys, leaving Madison locked away like some dark family secret. "She said it was temporary," Madison continued, her voice growing stronger now in her father's presence, "just until Kyle's room was renovated." But then, weeks passed, and she gestured to the makeshift living space she'd created. "I tried to make it work, Daddy. I even started learning to cook since I was here anyway." A weak smile crossed her face, an attempted bravery that broke John's heart. The sound of footsteps on the front porch interrupted their reunion. John's military instincts kicked in as he moved toward the kitchen door, positioning himself between it and his daughter. But instead of Linda's key in the lock, there came a gentle knock and a soft, concerned voice. "Madison, it's Karen Roberts. I brought you some lunch, honey." Karen Roberts stood at the kitchen door, a covered casserole dish in her trembling hands. She was everything Linda was, warm, genuine, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. For 6 months, she had been Madison's secret guardian, her presence a lifeline in an increasingly isolated world. "I'm Karen Roberts," she said, meeting John's questioning gaze. "I moved in next door about 7 months ago." Her voice carried the soft lilt of the Midwestern countryside, steady but cautious. "I've been watching over Madison when I could." John unlocked the door, noticing how Karen's eyes immediately went to Madison, checking for signs of distress, a practiced gesture that spoke volumes about their established routine. The aroma of homemade chicken pot pie filled the kitchen, and Madison's face brightened slightly. "I teach English at the local high school," Madison explained, straightening her wrinkled clothes. "I figured something was wrong when I saw you studying by flashlight through the kitchen window late one night." Karen set the casserole down, her hands clasping and unclasping nervously. "I tried reporting it, Captain Morgan, 3 times. Actually, but Linda, she's well connected with the school board, respected in the community. She had explanations for everything," said Madison, troubled, making up stories for attention after her mother's death. Karen's voice caught. They believed her over a new teacher in town. The full weight of Karen's involvement began to unfold. She had done more than provide meals. She'd slipped textbooks through the window, graded Madison's homework, and most importantly, given her hope through whispered conversations and notes passed through the crack under the kitchen door. She had kept Madison's spirit from breaking entirely. I started bringing extra food when I realized the boys were gone every weekend, Karen continued, maintaining her professional composure as it cracked slightly. Linda would leave sandwiches, but a growing teenager needs more than that. We developed a system. 3 taps on the window meant food, 2 meant Linda was coming. 1. She paused, looking at Madison. Meant you're not alone. John watched as his daughter moved naturally to stand beside Karen, their bond evident in the gentle way the teacher's hand came to rest on Madison's shoulder. In his absence, this stranger had become his daughter's protector, risking her career and reputation in a town where Linda's influence ran deep. There's more you need to know, Captain, Karen said softly, reaching into her bag. About Jay and Kyle, things aren't what they seem. Karen withdrew a folded piece of paper from her bag, hesitating before handing it to John. It was a handwritten note in distinctly teenage handwriting. Ms. Roberts, Mom took Madison's phone again. Can you make sure she gets my old calculus notes? Don't tell her they're from me. This isn't the only one, Karen explained, producing more notes. Jay has been leaving his lunch money in Madison's locker since March, and Kyle has been slipping his desserts under the kitchen door when Linda isn't looking. They're trapped in their own way. Captain Morgan's eyes widened at the money and the extra food that was from Jay. His voice trembled with realization, but then Linda said, They wanted me gone. They complained about sharing space with me. John spread the notes across the kitchen counter, each one telling a fragment of a larger, more disturbing story. Notes from Jay asking Karen to check on Madison during storms because she'd always been afraid of thunder. Messages from Kyle sharing answers to homework assignments through Karen, maintaining their unofficial study partnership despite their forced separation. Your sons have been trying to protect her, Karen said softly to John. But Linda, she is masterful at manipulation. She tells Jay that one wrong move could send him back to his father. She reminds Kyle that she is the only one who has ever supported his academic dreams. She has created an environment of fear and dependency. A particularly revealing note caught John's attention. Ms. Roberts, Mom is taking us to Florida this weekend. It read, Said it's for my birthday, but it's not until November. Something is wrong. Please watch Madison, Kyle. The pieces were falling into place. Linda hadn't just isolated Madison. She had orchestrated a complex web of emotional manipulation, playing her children against each other while maintaining a perfect facade for the outside world. The weekend trips, the locked doors, the intercepted letters, all part of a calculated strategy to break the bonds between siblings and destroy any evidence of her actions. John's voice was hoarse as he asked, Where are they now? Still in Florida, Madison answered. Linda said they're touring colleges, but Kyle is only 14. Karen stepped forward, her teacher instinct for protection evident in her stance. Captain Morgan, Linda is scheduled to return tomorrow. Whatever you're planning, the children, all 3 of them, need to be protected. They've been fighting this battle alone for too long. A kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed, marking time in a house where time had stood still for months. John Morgan, who had faced enemy fire without flinching, now felt a different kind of fear. This was a battlefield with clear enemies and allies. This was his home, and somewhere between his deployment and his return, it had become a psychological war zone with his children caught in the crossfire. By late afternoon, The Morgan home had become an investigation site, though not the kind Captain Morgan was accustomed to from his military career. The dining room table, once the center of family meals, now displayed a timeline of evidence that painted a disturbing picture of systematic abuse. With Karen's help, John methodically sorted through 8 months of family records. Bank statements revealed unexplained withdrawals from the children's college funds, money Linda had access to during his deployment. School records showed a stark contrast. While Kyle and Jay maintained their privileged positions in advanced placement courses, Madison's grades had plummeted, accompanied by numerous unexplained absences that Linda had authorized with practiced ease. The school trusted her implicitly, Karen explained, spreading out Madison's attendance records. Who would question a guidance counselor about her own family? A finger traced a pattern of absences that coincided perfectly with Linda's weekend trips. She detailed the administration that Madison was visiting colleges or attending family events no one thought to verify. The most damning evidence came from Madison's personal diary, discovered hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the kitchen. The entries chronicled a gradual descent into isolation, beginning with subtle changes in Linda's behavior shortly after John's deployment. February 15th. Linda says the boys need more space for their study. She suggested I move into the guest room temporarily. Dad would want me to be cooperative. March 3rd. The guest room furniture is gone. Linda says there was a mix-up with the donation center. I'm sleeping in the kitchen now. She promises it's just for a week. March 17th. My phone disappeared today. Linda says I must have lost it at school, but I saw it on her desk when I mentioned it. She reminded me how expensive it was for Dad to keep me in private school. John's hands trembled as he read entry after entry, each page revealing how his daughter's world had contracted, while Linda's control expanded. The diary entries became increasingly sparse as Madison's isolation grew, but one particular entry stood out, dated just 2 weeks ago. Jay sneaked me Mom's old locket today, he wrote. He said he found it in Linda's drawer with Dad's letters. Linda told me Mom never left anything for me. I knew she was lying. Mom did love me. I just have to hold on until Dad comes home. He always keeps his promises. The locket in question now lay on the table, a small, heart-shaped piece that had belonged to Emily, John's late wife. He had searched for it after Emily's death, wanting to give it to Madison when she was older. Linda had claimed it must have been lost in their last move. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the evidence of Linda's betrayal, John heard Karen's sharp intake of breath. She held up a stack of papers found in Linda's home office. Captain Morgan, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger, these are transfer papers. Linda has been planning to move the boys to a private school in Florida, and there's something else. She pulled out a document bearing an official letterhead paperwork to relinquish custody of Madison to the state, citing unmanageable behavioral issues. It was dated for next month. The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. This was just about isolation or emotional abuse. Linda had been systematically preparing to dismantle the entire family, piece by piece, all while maintaining her reputation as a devoted mother and respected community member. As evening descended on the Morgan home, Karen's methodical search through Linda's office revealed a hidden compartment in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. Inside lay a leather-bound journal and a stack of medical records that would shed light on the darkness that had consumed their family. These records date back 15 years, Karen said, her professional demeanor giving way to growing concern as she examined the documents. Linda was hospitalized for severe depression after her first husband abandoned her, and the boys she underwent extensive therapy. But then she paused, Scanning the more recent entries, she stopped taking her medication shortly after your deployment. Captain John leaned forward, examining the journal entries that chronicled Linda's gradual descent. The handwriting evolved from neat, measured strokes to increasingly erratic scrawls. April 12th. John's letters to Madison arrive every week like clockwork. He never wrote to the boys this much during his previous deployments. Jay asked about it today. I saw the hurt in his eyes, the same hurt I saw when their father left. May 3rd. Found Madison looking at old photos of Emily today. John keeps them everywhere perfect. Emily, beautiful. Emily, dead. Emily, who still has more presence in this house than I do. Even my own sons prefer her daughter to me now. June 15th. The medication makes everything foggy. How can I protect my boys if I can't think clearly? John's unit reported casualties today. What if he doesn't? He come back? I want he let them take my sons from me again, not like before. The journal revealed a woman unraveling her grip on reality, distorted by untreated mental illness and deep-seated abandonment issues. Linda had created elaborate conspiracies in her mind, convincing herself that Madison was somehow turning her sons against her, that John's deployment was actually abandonment in disguise. A separate folder contained emails between Linda and her ex-husband, revealing another layer of manipulation. She had been telling the boys that their father wanted nothing to do with them, while simultaneously blocking his attempts to maintain contact. The same pattern she would later repeat with John's letters to Madison. Look at this, Karen said softly, holding up a recent bank statement. Large withdrawals every month sent to an address in Florida. She cross-referenced it with property records on her laptop. It's a beachfront condo purchased 3 months ago. She has been planning this for a while, systematically moving money and establishing a new life without Madison. John's military training had taught him to analyze threats, but nothing had prepared him for this level of calculated domestic warfare. Linda hadn't just been isolating Madison, she had been systematically erasing all traces of Emily and John from their lives, creating a narrative of abandonment that would justify her actions to her sons. An alert chimed on Karen's phone, a text message from J's mom, talking about leaving early, something about bad weather coming. Please tell Ms. Roberts to check on Madison. We'll try. The countdown had begun. Linda was returning ahead of schedule, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. John had less than 24 hours to prepare for a confrontation that would either save his family or shatter it completely. As night fell over the Morgan residence, Captain John Morgan transformed his living room into a command center, drawing on years of military strategic planning. Time was of the essence with Linda's premature return looming. Karen remained by his side, her educational expertise proving invaluable in documenting the case. I've contacted Judge William Harrison, John said, reviewing his notes. He is an old family friend and has agreed to issue an emergency custody order for all 3 children, effective immediately. He glanced at the clock. 9:47 p.m. The paperwork will be ready by morning. Karen organized the evidence methodically. Financial records, intercepted letters, medical documents, and most crucially, Linda's own journal entries, each piece carefully photographed and digitally backed up. The school board will need to be notified, she added. Linda's position as a counselor gives her access to vulnerable students. They'll want to conduct their own investigation. A text message illuminated Karen's phone. Another update from JS booked morning flights, ETA 10 a.m. tomorrow. Kyle's pretending to be sick to slow her down. I overheard her on the phone with someone named Richard about property closings. John's jaw tightened. Richard Thompson, Linda's attorney, whose signature appeared on both the custody relinquishment papers and the Florida property documents was another piece of her elaborate escape plan. "Madison needs to be moved tonight," John decided, his voice firm but gentle. "Karen, would you be willing to take her? Your house is within the school district, and the custody order will cover temporary placement with a licensed teacher." Madison, who had been silently sorting through her mother's old photographs at the dining room table, looked up. "What about Jay and Kyle? They tried to help me. Dad, we can't leave them with her." John knelt beside his daughter, struck by her concern for her stepbrothers despite everything she'd endured. "The custody order covers all three of you, sweetheart. When Linda arrives tomorrow, the boys will come directly here. Judge Harrison has already arranged for a family counselor to be present," Karen added softly. "I've spoken with my sister Beth. She has a trauma counselor in Denver. She is flying in tomorrow to help with the transition. The children will need professional support to process everything." As midnight approached, they executed the plan with military precision. Madison's few belongings were packed and transferred to Karen's house. John documented the kitchen's condition one final time, photographing the makeshift bedroom that would serve as damning evidence of Linda's abuse. Before leaving, Madison paused in the kitchen doorway, clutching her mother's locket. "Dad," her voice wavered, "promise you won't let her separate us again. Jay and Kyle, they're my brothers now, no matter what Linda says." John embraced his daughter, recognizing in her words the same strength that had characterized her mother. "I promise, sweetheart. Tomorrow we start rebuilding our family, all of us together." As he watched Madison walk safely to Karen's house next door, John Morgan prepared himself for the confrontation to come, a confrontation that would require more than military strategy or legal maneuvering. It would require the delicate balance of justice and mercy, the wisdom to protect his children while acknowledging Linda's illness, and the strength to rebuild what had been broken. The following morning dawned with an almost surreal quietness over the Morgan residence. At precisely 9:47 a.m., surveillance footage from JFK International Airport confirmed what John already knew. Linda was on her way home, accompanied by Jay and Kyle, blissfully unaware that her carefully constructed facade was about to shatter. John sat in his study, surrounded by the evidence of Linda's deception, when the first text from Jay arrived. "Mom is acting strange, keeps checking her phone and making calls." Minutes later, another message. "She knows something is wrong. The house alarm was triggered last night." Through the window, John could see Karen in her kitchen, preparing breakfast for Madison. His daughter appeared to be sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, curled up on a proper bed, surrounded by the warmth of genuine care. The contrast between the two households couldn't have been more stark. At 10:23 a.m., the sound of tires on gravel announced Linda's arrival. John watched through the study window as she emerged from her luxury SUV, her designer outfit and perfectly coiffed hair a testament to her obsession with appearances. Jay and Kyle followed behind her, their bodies tense, eyes immediately scanning the window's learned behavior that spoke volumes about their home life. "Boys, take the bags inside," Linda's voice carried across the morning air, the forced cheerfulness barely masking an undercurrent of tension. "We'll discuss the school transfer over lunch," John observed, noting his stepson's subtle resistance, the slightly slower pace, the exchanged glances, the way Jay positioned himself between his younger brother and their mother. These weren't the actions of troubled teens, but of survivors who had learned to navigate their mother's unpredictable moods. The front door opened, and Linda's manufactured smile froze as she stepped into the foyer. John had intentionally left Madison's school photos on the wall, but added something new: printed copies of Linda's journal entries, medical records, and bank statements, methodically arranged like a grotesque family album. "John!" Linda's voice wavered, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "You're home," she began, her eyes darting to the documents on the wall, then to her sons, who stood rooted in the doorway. "I can explain everything." The boys needed more space, and Madison, she has been so difficult since you left. "Stop." John's voice cut through her excuses like a blade. "The boys know everything, Linda, about the letters you intercepted, about the money you've been moving about Florida." He turned to Jay and Kyle. "Your bags are already packed. Karen's waiting next door. You'll be staying there with your sister while we sort this out." Linda's transformation was instantaneous. The polished facade crumbled, revealing something raw and desperate beneath. "My sons are not going anywhere with that woman. She has poisoned all of you against me just like Emily did, turning my own children, Mom." Jay's voice was steady, years of protected anger finally surfacing. "Melissa slept on a kitchen floor for 6 months. We watched you lock her in, lie to Dad, intercept our letters." Kyle cried. "I cried myself to sleep every night, hearing you through the wall. It's over." The boys moved toward the door, but Linda's next words stopped them cold. "If you leave now, you'll end up just like your father, alone, worthless, begging to see children who don't want you anymore inside Karen's home." Madison stood at the window, watching the confrontation unfold across the lawn, her fingers instinctively clutching her mother's locket. Beth, Karen's sister, gently placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine suburban landscape, a stark contrast to the emotional tempest brewing within. "Your brothers are coming," Beth said softly, her professional demeanor tempered with genuine warmth, as a trauma counselor who recognized the complex layers of family dynamics unfolding before them. "They're choosing to break the cycle." "Madison," Beth continued, "that takes tremendous courage." Through the window, they watched as Jay and Kyle walked steadily toward Karen's house, their steps becoming more confident with each yard of distance they put between themselves and their mother. Linda's voice carried across the morning air a desperate symphony of threats and pleading that seemed to diminish as the boys approached. Inside Karen's living room, the transformation was immediate. Kyle, the younger brother, who had maintained perfect grades despite the turmoil at home, finally allowed his carefully constructed facade to crumble. He rushed to Madison, enveloping her in a fierce hug. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "We should have done more. We should have told someone sooner. Every night, I could hear you through the wall. I used to play classical music, hoping it would help you sleep." Jay remained by the door, his tall frame rigid with tension. At 17, he had become the family's unofficial protector, a role that had aged him beyond his years. "She has been planning this for months," he revealed, pulling out a folder from his backpack. "The Florida school transfers, the new house, everything she was going to tell Dad, that Madison had run away, that she couldn't handle the troubled teen anymore." Beth moved quietly through the room, her trained eye assessing each child's emotional state. "You've all been carrying this burden alone for too long," she observed. "But look at you now, together, supporting each other. That's not what broken people do, that's what survivors do." The sound of breaking glass from the Morgan house interrupted the moment. Through the window, they could see Linda in full meltdown, her carefully maintained image shattering like the vase she had thrown. John stood calmly, his military training evident in his composed stance as he blocked her path toward Karen's house. "She is not well," Jay explained, his voice tight with emotion. "It hasn't been since Dad left us, but that doesn't excuse what she did to Madison, to any of us." He pulled out his phone, showing a series of text messages. I've been documenting everything. The threats, the manipulation, the way she'd play us against each other. I knew someday someone would need to know the truth." As the morning progressed, Karen's home became a sanctuary of healing. The three siblings, finally free from their mother's manipulation, began the delicate process of reconnecting. Kyle shared his secret stash of family photos, including ones of Emily that Linda had claimed were lost. Madison showed them her mother's locket, now containing tiny pictures of all three of them. "We're not her weapons anymore," Jay declared, watching as Linda was escorted from the Morgan house by local law enforcement. "We're a family, maybe not the way she wanted, but the way we choose to be." As evening settled over the neighborhood, Karen's home transformed into a makeshift family counseling center. Beth orchestrated a structured but gentle approach to the day's events, understanding that the immediate aftermath of trauma required both professional guidance and personal space. In the living room, John sat with all three children, his military bearing softened by paternal concern. The coffee table between them held a spread of Karen's homemade comfort food largely untouched, yet providing a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. "The judge has granted emergency custody orders," John explained in a steady, reassuring voice. "All three of you will stay here with Karen for the next 72 hours while we secure and document everything at home. Beth will be staying too, to help us navigate this transition." Jay nodded, his protector instincts still evident as he sat slightly forward, positioned between his siblings and the window. "What about Mom's hearing tomorrow? She is being held for psychological evaluation," Beth interjected gently. "The evidence your father gathered, combined with her behavior today, warranted immediate intervention. She'll receive the help she has needed for a long time." Kyle, who had barely spoken since their mother's arrest, finally broke his silence. "Will they make us testify? Make us tell everyone what happened?" His voice carried the weight of years of forced secrecy. "No," John assured them firmly. "The documentation speaks for itself. Your only job now is to heal together." Madison, who had been quietly arranging and rearranging the family photos she'd recovered, looked up at her father. "What about school? Everyone will know by Monday." Karen, who had been discreetly organizing sleeping arrangements, joined the conversation. "I've already spoken with Principal Matthews. We're implementing an immediate support system. You'll each have private counseling available, and your teachers have been briefed to provide academic flexibility while you adjust." As night approached, the practical aspects of their new reality began to settle in. Beth helped establish a routine, understanding that structure would be crucial in the coming days. The siblings would share Karen's converted basement, transformed into a comfortable living space with 3 proper beds, and a pointed contrast to Madison's months in the kitchen. Remember, Beth addressed them as they prepared for their first night of genuine freedom. "Healing isn't linear. You'll have good days and hard days, but you'll have them together now, and with a support system that won't fail you." John watched as his children, all 3 of them, began the delicate process of reclaiming their sense of security. Jay had finally allowed his guard to drop slightly, accepting a cup of hot chocolate from Karen. Kyle had retrieved his textbooks, finding comfort in the familiar routine of studying, and Madison, his resilient daughter, had fallen asleep on the couch, her mother's locket clutched in one hand and her brother's childhood photo in the other. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: legal proceedings, therapy sessions, and the long process of rebuilding trust. But tonight, in the warm safety of Karen's home, the foundations of healing had begun to take root. The stark fluorescent lights of Brookside Psychiatric Center cast harsh shadows across the consultation room 3 days after Linda's arrest. Dr. Matthews, the facility's chief psychiatrist, sat across from John Morgan, her expression grave as she reviewed the extensive documentation. "Captain Morgan, what we're dealing with here is far more complex than initial reports suggested," Dr. Matthews began in a measured, professional tone. "Linda's psychological evaluation has revealed a severe underlying condition that went untreated for years. The abandonment by her first husband triggered a cascading pattern of paranoid behavior and control mechanisms." John leaned forward, his military posture unwavering despite his exhaustion. "I need to understand. Doctor, how did none of us see this coming?" Dr. Matthews opened Linda's file, revealing years of carefully concealed mental health records. Linda was extraordinarily skilled at compartmentalizing her behavior. As a guidance counselor, she knew exactly how to present herself to the world. She used her professional knowledge to manipulate the system, making any concerns about her behavior seem unfounded. The doctor produced a series of journal entries dating back to John's deployment. These writings show a progressive breakdown in her ability to distinguish reality from her paranoid fantasies. The isolation of Madison wasn't just about punishment, it was about control. In Linda's distorted worldview, Madison represented everything she feared: abandonment, replacement, the loss of her own children's love. A knock at the door interrupted them as Linda's attorney, Richard Thompson, entered with Beth, who had been appointed as the family's advocate. The contrast between them was striking: Richard's polished corporate demeanor against Beth's compassionate professionalism. "We've reviewed the preliminary findings," Richard announced in a clipped tone, "and given the circumstances, we're prepared to discuss terms for a monitored rehabilitation program and supervised visitation rights." "Absolutely not," John said firmly. "The damage she has inflicted on these children goes beyond physical isolation. She's systematically destroyed their sense of security, their trust and family bonds." Jay still positions himself between every door, and his siblings Kyle can't sleep without checking the locks multiple times. And Madison. He paused, composing himself. Madison still wraps her food in napkins, hiding it away like she did in that kitchen. Dr. Matthews interjected. "The children's current psychological assessments show significant trauma responses. However, they've demonstrated remarkable resilience, particularly in their bonds with each other. These bonds need to be protected and nurtured during their recovery process." The conversation was interrupted by urgent footsteps in the hallway. A nurse appeared at the door, her expression concerned. "Dr. Matthews, Mrs. Morgan is demanding to see her sons. She has become extremely agitated. Security has been called, but she has threatening self-harm if we don't comply." The room tensed. Linda's voice could be heard echoing down the corridor, a haunting mixture of demands and pleading that sent chills through everyone present. "They're my boys. You can't keep them from me. I know what is best for them. I'm their mother." Down the sterile corridor of Brookside Psychiatric Center, Linda's voice grew more frantic. Dr. Matthews motioned for John to remain in the consultation room while she and the security team addressed the situation. The scene that unfolded would become a pivotal moment in the family's journey toward healing. Linda stood in the common area, her previously impeccable appearance now disheveled, her designer outfit replaced by standard facility attire, her carefully maintained facade crumbling with each passing moment. "They're trying to turn my sons against me, just like their father did," she shouted, clutching a framed family photo she'd been allowed to keep in her room. Dr. Matthews approached carefully, her experienced demeanor projecting calm authority. "Linda, let us discuss this in your room. Your sons are safe, and they're being well cared for." "Safe?" Linda's laugh held a sharp edge of hysteria. "You don't understand. John's poisoning them against me, just like Emily did. Perfect Emily, who still controls this family from beyond. I saw how she did it, turning my own boys into her daughter's protectors. I had to stop it. From the consultation room doorway, John watched the scene unfold, his military training warring with his paternal instincts. Beth stood beside him, documenting every word for the ongoing legal proceedings. I did what any mother would do, Linda continued, her voice shifting between rage and pleading. I had to separate them before she took them away from me. The letters, the phone calls, the secret meetings. They were all plotting against me, just like before, just like their father. Dr. Matthews maintained her professional composure, though her expression betrayed her growing concern. Linda, you stopped taking your medication 8 months ago. These paranoid thoughts aren't reality. Your sons weren't being turned against you, they were trying to protect their sister from abuse. Abuse? Linda's voice rose sharply. I gave them everything: a roof overhead, food, education. I even left them sandwiches when we went away. She is the one who turned my family against me. She is just like her mother, taking everything I love. The security team moved slowly into position as Linda became more agitated in her increasing distress. I found Emily's letters, she confessed, her words tumbling out in a frenzied stream. The one she wrote before she died, letters for Madison's birthdays, graduation, wedding day, perfect words from a perfect mother. I couldn't let her when I couldn't let her keep controlling my family from beyond. So, I burned them, every last one, just like I burned John's letters, just like I was going to burn everything that connected them. John's sharp intake of breath echoed in the sudden silence. The letters his late wife had written for their daughter's future milestones, precious words he'd searched for after Emily's death, had been destroyed in Linda's campaign to erase Emily's memory from their lives. Dr. Matthews saw the moment of vulnerability. Linda, this isn't about Emily or Madison. This is about your unresolved trauma from your first marriage. You're projecting those fears onto your current family, creating enemies where there are none. Linda's composure crumbled entirely as Dr. Matthews' words penetrated her carefully constructed defenses. She sank to her knees, still clutching the family photograph, her carefully maintained facade finally shattering completely. I had a dream last week, she whispered, her voice taking on an eerily calm quality. I saw my first husband with Emily. They were laughing, planning to take all my children away. Emily was holding Madison's hand, but Jay and Kyle were there too. They were calling her Mom. She looked up at Dr. Matthews, her eyes filled with tears. Do you know what it's like to watch your children being stolen piece by a dead woman? John stepped forward, unable to remain silent any longer. No one was stealing them. Linda, Emily's memory was a threat to you, he said. She was a mother who loved her daughter enough to write letters for every milestone. She knew she'd miss you. You didn't just destroy papers, you destroyed Madison's connection to her mother. Linda's attention snapped to John, her expression shifting rapidly between vulnerability and defiance. You don't understand. I had to protect my family, the Florida house, the new schools. It was all for them, away from her influence, away from all of this. We could have been happy. Dr. Matthews signaled the security team to stand down as she knelt beside Linda. You're describing paranoid delusions, Linda. Your fear of abandonment created enemies where there were none. Emily was a threat, and Madison was stealing your sons. They formed bonds because they're siblings who care for each other. But the letters, Linda persisted, her voice small. John wrote to you every week, pages and pages about how special you were, how proud he was. Jay found them and asked why his father never wrote like that. Kyle cried when he read them. I had to protect them from feeling unloved again. The revelation struck John like a physical blow. The letters he'd written to Madison hadn't just been intercepted, they'd become weapons in Linda's psychological warfare, hurting all three children in different ways. "Your sons weren't jealous of those letters," Linda began, but Beth interjected gently. "They were proud of their sister. They tried to protect her, because that's what family does. The only one creating division was you." Linda's grip on the photograph loosened, the frame clattered to the floor. The glass cracked, creating a web of fractures across the smiling faces of their once united family. "I didn't mean to," she whispered, the fight finally leaving her body. "I just couldn't bear to lose them again, not like before, not like him." Dr. Matthews helped Linda to her feet, signaling for a nurse to bring medication. "This is the first step," she said. "Linda, acknowledging these fears and understanding their source is the beginning of real healing, not just for you, but for everyone you've hurt." As Linda was led away, John retrieved the cracked photograph from the floor. Through the shards of broken glass, he could see the truth. They'd all missed the signs of Linda's deterioration, which had been there all along, hidden behind perfect smiles and carefully staged happiness. In the quiet solitude of Karen's living room, John Morgan faced the difficult task of sharing the day's revelations with his children. The evening sun cast long shadows through the windows as Beth and Karen sat nearby, providing silent support for what would become one of the most challenging conversations of their lives. "Your mother's letters," John began, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "The ones Mom wrote before she passed away." Madison Linda found them, paused, searching for the right words to convey such a profound loss. Madison, who had been absently stroking her mother's locket, looked up sharply. "The birthday letters, the ones you said Mom wrote for me." Her voice trembled with understanding. "They're gone, aren't they?" John nodded, the weight of the loss evident in his bearing. "Linda burned them, sweetheart. She saw them as a threat to her relationship with all of you. In her mind, your mother's presence, even through those letters, was somehow stealing her family away." J.'s reaction was immediate and visceral. He stood abruptly, his tall frame rigid with anger. "She had no right," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Those letters weren't hers to destroy. They weren't about her at all." His hands clenched into fists at his sides, years of suppressed rage finally finding focus. Kyle, ever the quiet observer, spoke up from his position by the window. "I remember finding one of them once in Mom's desk drawer. I only saw the envelope. It said for Madison's 16th birthday in really pretty handwriting. When I asked about it, Mom said it was just old paperwork and locked the drawer." Beth leaned forward, her professional demeanor softening with compassion. "What Linda did was an act of profound violation. She didn't just destroy paper, she tried to erase a mother's final gifts to her daughter. But she couldn't erase the love those letters represented." Madison suddenly moved to the family photo album she'd rescued from the kitchen, her hands trembling as she pulled out a worn photograph of Emily taken just weeks before her death. "I used to imagine what those letters said," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "On bad nights in the kitchen, I'd make up words I thought Mom might have written and helped me feel less alone." The revelation struck John like a physical blow. While he had been deployed, believing his daughter was safe and cared for, she had been lying on a kitchen floor, creating imaginary letters from her dead mother for comfort. The magnitude of Linda's actions, not just the physical isolation, but the emotional devastation she had inflicted, became devastatingly clear. "There's more," John continued, knowing they needed to understand the full scope of Linda's deception. "The letters I wrote to you, Madison Linda didn't just hide them, she used them to hurt your brothers too." In Karen's living room, The weight of John's revelation hung heavy in the air. The setting sun cast a golden glow through the windows, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere that belied the gravity of the moment. Beth positioned herself closer to the siblings, recognizing the delicate nature of what was about to be disclosed. "Linda showed you my letters, didn't she?" Madison asked her brother softly, understanding dawning in her eyes. "That's why you started leaving notes and food. You knew the truth before anyone else." Jay, his composure maintained through years of protecting his siblings, finally cracked. "She would read them to us," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "Every time Dad wrote about how proud he was of you, how much he missed you, she'd say, 'See, this is what a father's love looks like. Your father never wrote letters like this.'" Kyle moved closer to his sister, his academic facade falling away to reveal the vulnerable 14-year-old beneath. "But it had the opposite effect of what she intended," he explained. "Instead of making us resent you, it showed us what she was doing, the way she twisted everything into a weapon." John watched his children, his military training providing little defense against the pain of witnessing their shared trauma. "Linda used those letters to try to create division," he explained gently. "She believed that by highlighting the differences in how I expressed love, she could drive you apart. Instead, she brought you closer together. She didn't understand. Jay," he continued, steadying his voice every time she read those letters, "trying to hurt us, we saw more clearly what real parental love looked like. It made us realize how wrong everything was at home." Madison reached for her brother's hands, forming a circle that represented their unbreakable bond. "I used to hear Kyle playing classical music at night," she whispered through the kitchen wall. "I never knew it was for me Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata." Kyle confirmed, tears falling freely. "Now, Mom used to play it when we were little, before Dad left. I thought maybe it would help you feel less alone." Beth interjected softly, her professional insight guiding the conversation. "What you three have done is remarkable. Instead of allowing Linda's actions to divide you, you've created your own support system. You've transformed her weapons of division into bonds of unity." The sibling circle tightened, their shared pain becoming a foundation for healing rather than a source of division. John watched as his daughter and stepson's victims of a tragedy, not of their making, demonstrated a strength and resilience that transcended their years. "There is something else you should know," John added, knowing they needed the full truth to move forward. "Linda had plans that would have affected all of you. The Florida house, the new schools, it was just about moving away it was about." In Karen's living room, as evening settled into night, John Morgan prepared to share the most devastating aspect of Linda's plans. The room had grown quiet, with only the gentle hum of the heating system providing background to this difficult moment. "The Florida arrangements weren't just about a fresh start," John began, his military bearing providing the strength needed to continue. "Linda had filed paperwork to relinquish custody of Madison to the state, citing fabricated behavioral issues. She had orchestrated an elaborate plan to permanently separate you three, using her position as a guidance counselor to manipulate the system." The impact of this revelation rippled through the room. Madison's grip on her brother's hands tightened, while Jay's protective stance became more pronounced. Kyle, the academic whose intelligence had always been his shield, appeared to physically diminish under the weight of this knowledge. "The documentation we found," John continued, "showed that she had already arranged for Jay and Kyle to attend separate private schools in Florida. The plan was to isolate each of you, removing any possibility of maintaining contact. She had even begun spreading carefully crafted rumors about Madison's mental state among her colleagues at school." Beth intervened professionally, recognizing the trauma response building in the siblings. This revelation isn't meant to hurt you further, she explained gently. Understanding the full scope of Linda's actions is crucial for your healing process. It validates the fear and uncertainty you've all been carrying. Jade broke the heavy silence that followed. She told us the Florida schools were opportunities, elite academic programs that would guarantee our futures, but she always avoided explaining why we couldn't attend the same school. His composure cracked slightly. I would have lost both my siblings. Kyle, who had remained silent, suddenly spoke with unexpected clarity. She was recreating her own trauma. When our father left, he separated us from our old life completely. She was doing the same thing, but convincing herself it was for our protection. Madison, who had endured months of isolation in the kitchen, demonstrated remarkable strength as she addressed her brothers firmly. Because what she tried to destroy made us stronger. Every note you slipped under the door, every midnight snack, every classical music piece. They weren't just acts of kindness, they were acts of defiance against her plan to separate us. John watched as his children, faced with the darkest truth of their ordeal, chose unity over despair. The tragedy of Linda's planned destruction of our family has instead cemented bonds that transcend blood relations and legal documents. He said, "There's one more thing you need to know." Reaching for a folder Beth had brought from the psychiatric facility, he continued, Linda's evaluation revealed severe, untreated trauma and paranoid delusions. The woman who did these things was entirely the same person who first brought our families together in the serene confines of Dr. Matthews' office at Brookside Psychiatric Center. The morning light filtered through Venetian blinds as Dr. Matthews presented Linda's comprehensive psychological evaluation to John Morgan and Beth. The thick manila folder on her desk contained decades of medical history that painted a disturbing picture of untreated trauma and escalating mental illness. Captain Morgan, Dr. Matthews began, her voice carrying the weight of professional concern. Linda's condition is the result of severe childhood abandonment issues, exacerbated by her first husband's departure. Her medical records reveal a pattern of increasingly paranoid behavior that began long before your marriage. She opened the file, revealing psychiatric evaluations dating back to Linda's adolescence. At age 12, Linda's father abandoned her family without warning. This traumatic event created deep-seated abandonment anxiety that manifested in increasingly controlling behavior. Her first marriage triggered these underlying issues, and your deployment became the catalyst for a complete psychological break. Beth, reviewing her own notes, added context to the revelation. The timing is crucial here. Linda's decision to stop taking her prescribed medication coincided almost exactly with your deployment orders, Captain Morgan. The combination of your absence and her unmedicated state created a perfect storm of paranoid delusions. Dr. Matthews continued, her professional demeanor softening slightly. In Linda's distorted reality, Emily's continued presence in your family through photographs, letters, and Madison's resemblance to her mother became evidence of an elaborate conspiracy to steal her children. Every act of sibling affection between Madison and her brothers was interpreted as proof of this imagined plot. John, who had maintained his composure through countless military briefings, found himself struggling to reconcile this clinical analysis with the woman he had married. But the calculated nature of her actions, the intercepted letters, the Florida plans, the systematic isolation of Madison, these don't seem like the actions of someone who has lost touch with reality. That's what makes her condition so complex. Dr. Matthews explained, turning to a detailed psychological profile. Linda's professional training as a guidance counselor allowed her to maintain a facade of normalcy, while her paranoid delusions intensified. She used her understanding of the school system and child psychology to orchestrate what she genuinely believed was a rescue mission saving her sons from what she perceived as the corrupting influence of Emily S. memory. She produced a journal entry dated just weeks before John S. early return. The handwriting, once elegant and controlled, had become increasingly erratic. The boys smiled at her today, just like Emily used to smile. They're becoming hers, just like everything else. The Florida house is ready once we're away from her influence. They'll all remember who their real mother is. They'll all understand. I did this to protect them, and they'll all love me again. The revelation hung heavy in the air. Linda S.'s actions, while methodically executed, had been driven not by malice, but by a profound mental illness that distorted her perception of reality and love itself. At Brookside Psychiatric Center's family consultation room, Dr. Matthews continued her detailed explanation of Linda's psychological state to John and Beth. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across the consultation table, where Linda's extensive medical records tell a story of progressive psychological deterioration. What we're seeing here, Dr. Matthews explained, indicating a series of brain scans, is the physiological impact of untreated trauma and severe anxiety. Linda's decision to discontinue her medication created a cascade effect in her neurochemistry, fundamentally altering her perception of reality. John studied the medical data before him. His military training and threat assessment provided an unexpected framework for understanding the situation. The progression seems to have accelerated after my deployment, he observed, noting the dates on various psychological evaluations. Precisely, Dr. Matthews confirmed. Your deployment triggered what we call a catastrophic regression. Linda's childhood abandonment trauma resurfaced, combining with her fears about her first marriage and her compromised mental state. She began seeing parallels between her past and present that didn't exist. Beth, reviewing her notes from recent therapy sessions, added crucial context. During our last session, Linda revealed something significant. She described having recurring nightmares where her first husband and Emily were conspiring together, planning to take all 3 children away. In her dreams, the children would transform altogether, taking on Emily's features. Dr. Matthews opened a leather-bound journal. Linda's private writings from the months leading up to the crisis. Listen to this entry from April. Today, I saw Emily in all of them the way Jay protects Madison, just like Emily used to protect her younger daughter, the way Kyle reads with her, sharing books like Emily did with her students. They're becoming her children, not mine. I have to save them before it's too late. The revelation struck John with particular force. The very bonds between the siblings that he had seen as a sign of family healing were, in Linda's mind, evidence of her worst fears coming true. The most concerning aspect, Dr. Matthews continued, was Linda's ability to maintain her professional facade while her internal reality crumbled. As a guidance counselor, she used her understanding of the system to validate her delusions. Every interaction between the siblings was documented and reframed as evidence of Emily's continuing influence. She produced a series of official-looking documents, Linda's professional observations of Madison's behavior at school that should have been routine academic reports, but instead became detailed manifestos of imagined manipulation and conspiracy, all written in the measured language of a mental health professional. This is why we couldn't see it, Beth interjected softly. Linda wasn't just hiding her illness. She was using her professional expertise to create a paper trail that would justify her actions. Every report, every documented incident, was building toward her ultimate goal of separating the children to protect them from an influence that existed only in her mind. The weight of understanding settled over the room. Linda's actions, while undeniably harmful, emerged from a place of profound mental illness rather than deliberate malice. Her attempt to destroy one family had been driven by her desperate, delusional attempt to save another one that existed only in her fractured perception of reality. In the late afternoon sunlight of Brookside's Psychiatric Center's family consultation room, Dr. Matthews presented her final assessment and treatment recommendations. The gravity of the situation is reflected in the careful arrangement of documents before me, each representing a different aspect of the complex path forward. Linda's treatment will require long-term specialized care, Dr. Matthews explained, addressing John and Beth. We're recommending a minimum 6-month residential program at our trauma recovery unit, followed by intensive outpatient therapy. The goal isn't just to stabilize her current condition, but to address the deep-rooted trauma that led to this crisis. John studied the treatment plan, his military background evident in his methodical view of each detail, and the children. How do we help them process this understanding of their mother's illness while still acknowledging the real harm they've suffered? Beth opened her therapeutic assessment folder, revealing detailed notes on each child's current emotional state. We're proposing a dual approach, individual therapy sessions for each child, focusing on their specific experiences and trauma, combined with carefully structured family therapy sessions. The key is helping them understand that acknowledging Linda's illness doesn't invalidate their pain or their right to feel hurt by her actions. Dr. Matthews nodded in agreement. Jay, in particular, shows signs of what we call parentification, taking on adult responsibilities to protect his siblings. While his actions were admirable, he needs support in reclaiming his role as a teenager. Kyla's academic perfectionism appears to be a coping mechanism, and Madison's experiences will require specialized, trauma-informed therapy. The discussion then turned to practical matters of legal guardianship and ongoing care. The court has granted you full custody of all 3 children, Beth confirmed, presenting the official documentation. However, we recommend maintaining some form of controlled contact with Linda as her treatment progresses, always supervised and guided by therapeutic professionals. John's expression reflected the weight of responsibility he now carried. How do we move forward as a family? How do we rebuild trust while honoring both the pain and the potential for healing? Dr. Matthews' response was measured and thoughtful. The fact that the siblings maintain their bonds despite Linda's attempts to separate them shows remarkable resilience. We'll build on that foundation, helping them understand that their mother's illness doesn't diminish the reality of their experiences or the strength they found in each other. As the meeting concluded, the path forward became clearer, not easier, but more defined. The family would face a long journey of healing, understanding, and reconstruction, guided by professionals who understood both the complexity of trauma and the possibility of recovery. 6 months after the events at Brookside Psychiatric Center, the Morgan residence had undergone a transformation that went far beyond its physical appearance. The autumn morning light streamed through newly installed windows, illuminating a home that had become a testament to healing and resilience. In the renovated kitchen, now a warm and welcoming space, John Morgan stood preparing breakfast with Madison. The old mattress and makeshift bedroom were long gone, replaced by a state-of-the-art cooking island where father and daughter shared their morning routine. Their easy conversation and synchronized movement spoke of months spent rebuilding their relationship through simple, everyday moments. "The college counselor was impressed with your story," John mentioned as he carefully flipped a pancake. "She said your perspective on family resilience was particularly compelling." Madison, arranging fresh fruit on 3 plates, smiled softly. Her recent academic achievements had become a source of pride for the entire family, marking her successful return to the top of her class. From upstairs came the familiar sound of classical music, Kyle practicing his morning piano routine. The instrument, a recent addition to their home, had become a symbol of his emotional recovery. What had once been a secret comfort offered through kitchen walls was now an open expression of familial support and artistic passion. Jay entered the kitchen, his athletic gear indicating his return from an early morning run at 18. He had gradually learned to release his self-imposed role of family protector, though his protective instincts remained evident in gentler, healthier ways. "Coach says I have a good shot at the college sports scholarship," he announced, accepting a glass of orange juice from his sister. The morning routine, so ordinary on its surface, represented months of careful therapeutic work. Each family member had found their own path toward healing, while maintaining the bonds that had sustained them through their darkest times. The kitchen, once a place of isolation and fear, had become the heart of their reconstructed family life. Karen, who had transitioned from emergency guardian to trusted family friend, appeared at the back door with her usual warm smile. Her presence had become an integral part of their support system, her home remaining a safe haven even after the immediate crisis had passed. "The garden club meeting is this afternoon," she reminded them, accepting a cup of coffee from John. "Beth thinks it would be good for Madison to share her herb gardening project." The mention of Beth was casual now. The trauma counselor's role had evolved from crisis intervention to supportive guidance. Her steady presence had helped the family navigate the complex emotions surrounding Linda's treatment and their own healing process. 3 weeks before Christmas, John Morgan sat in Dr. Matthews' office at Brookside Psychiatric Center for their monthly family progress review. The winter sun cast a gentle glow through the frosted windows, highlighting the positive changes documented in the reports before them. "The children's progress has been remarkable," Dr. Matthews noted, reviewing her latest assessments. "Jay has successfully transitioned to a more age-appropriate role within the family, excelling in both academics and athletics. His college applications show a young man who has found healthy ways to channel his protective instincts into future career aspirations in child advocacy law." John nodded, remembering how Jay's experiences had shaped his decision to pursue a legal career focused on family protection, and how Kyle's music therapy had been exceptionally effective. Dr. Matthews confirmed that his piano performances have become a form of emotional expression that benefits the entire family. "The weekly recitals he gives at the local children's ward here have been particularly therapeutic, both for him and our young patients." The conversation then turned to Madison's progress. "Her involvement in the school's peer support program has been transformative," Dr. Matthews continued, "and by helping other students navigate family challenges, she has found a way to transform her own experiences into a source of strength for others." John shared recent photographs of their renovated home, including the new family room where weekly therapy sessions now took place, a space designed with input from all 3 children, promoting both individual healing and family bonding. When it came to Linda's treatment, John inquired with a mix of concern and cautious hope. Dr. Matthews opened Linda's file, revealing detailed progress notes from her residential program. "She is responding well to the intensive therapy. The medication management has stabilized her condition, and she has begun to process the reality of her actions without the filter of paranoid delusions." Her recent letter to the children, which Beth reviewed, shows significant progress in understanding the impact of her behavior. The mention of letters carries particular weight, given their history under therapeutic supervision. Linda has begun writing carefully monitored communications to the children, not seeking forgiveness, but acknowledging their pain and her responsibility for it. The supervised family session planned for next month will be crucial. It will be the first time all 3 children have agreed to be present. Beth will facilitate, focusing on establishing healthy boundaries while allowing for the possibility of carefully managed future interactions. As John prepared to leave, Dr. Matthews shared one final observation. What's most encouraging is how your family has redefined itself. The bonds between the siblings, forged in adversity, have grown stronger through healing. They've learned that family isn't just about blood or legal ties, it's about choosing to support and protect each other, even in the hardest circumstances. On Christmas Eve, 1 year after John's unexpected return, the Morgan home radiated warmth and renewal. The living room, adorned with thoughtfully chosen decorations, reflected the family's journey from trauma to healing. Each ornament on the tree held special significance, crafted as a symbol of their collective resilience. Karen and Beth had joined the family celebration not as professional supports, but as cherished extended family members. Kyle sat at the piano, his fingers dancing across the keys in a melody that spoke of hope rather than hiding. Jay, coming home from his college interviews, shared animated stories about his plans to advocate for families in crisis. Madison expressed her commitment to helping other young people find their voice through writing and peer support. As midnight approached, John Morgan looked around at his transformed family. The military captain who had once discovered his daughter sleeping on a kitchen floor had learned profound lessons about strength, resilience, and the power of unconditional love. Their story, marked by both tragedy and triumph, had become a testament to the enduring spirit of family, not as a perfect institution, but as a continuous journey of growth, understanding, and healing. The clock struck 12, and snow began to fall softly outside. In the gentle piano notes of Kyle's playing, the warm laughter of siblings sharing stories, and the supportive presence of their extended family of choice, the Morgan household had become more than a rebuilt home. It was a sanctuary of hope, understanding, and unwavering love. In the depths of every family's journey lies a profound truth about resilience and redemption. The story of the Morgan family reminds us that even in our golden years, the power to heal, forgive, and rebuild remains eternally present. Like many of us who have witnessed the evolution of family dynamics over decades, their tale speaks to the heart of what it means to be a parent, a child, and a protector of those we love. Through military service, personal loss, and the complexities of blended families, we learn that strength often emerges from our deepest wounds. Just as we've watched our own children grow and face life as challenges, the Morgan siblings show us that youth can possess wisdom beyond their years, finding light in the darkest corners of adversity. Their story mirrors the experiences many of us have faced, the delicate balance of protecting our loved ones while allowing them to grow, the courage to confront mental health issues that our generation often kept hidden, and the realization that family bonds transcend blood relations. It reminds us that even at our age, it's never too late to heal old wounds, rebuild broken bridges, and create new traditions that honor both our past and our future. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video. An unscrupulous policewoman orders a young black girl to cut off her cherished braids, mistakenly branding her as a troublemaker. But when she discovers the girl's true lineage, it's too late. The girl's powerful father turns the tables, ensuring not only that the situation is reversed, but that the officer faces unimaginable consequences. What happens when a ruthless act threatens to derail a secret mission capable of saving countless lives? And can the girl ever reclaim her dignity after such a brutal humiliation? Before we dive into this gripping saga, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and be sure to subscribe for more stories that truly matter. It was late, yet the city streets still shimmered under the soft amber glow of streetlights. A gentle drizzle caused the shadows of the oaks to sway on the wet pavement. Emily Carter walked briskly, her heart soaring after her first ever solo performance at the Liberty Music Hall. Her immaculate white dress fluttered with every step, catching the faint light, while clutched tightly in her hand was the concert program, a symbol of her hard work and triumph. Emily inhaled deeply, although the air was chilly. She felt an inner warmth, the echo of the audience's applause, and the lingering strains of a Chopin nocturne, as if her fingertips were still dancing over piano keys. Every step along the deserted street felt like an encore performance, her eyes alight with pride not only for her achievement, but also for the admiration of her father, Nathan Carter, who had always been her greatest source of encouragement. Before leaving home that morning, Nathan had meticulously braided her hair into intricate yet elegant patterns, a ritual he reserved for special occasions. "Your hair is your crown, Emily," he had said, his eyes gleaming with pride. "Tonight, you will shine like the brightest star." Those braids were more than just a style, they symbolized his deep love and care. Emily gazed into the mirror and smiled, feeling every bit like a princess. However, the beautiful dream was soon to be overshadowed by a grim reality. Without warning, a patrol car silently pulled up behind her. The flashing red and blue lights cut through the dim radiance of Oak Street. As the sound of the engine grew louder, a hint of dread crept into her heart. At the wheel was Officer Samantha Brooks, a middle-aged cop with years of street experience. Fresh off a long shift, Samantha's fatigue made her irritable. Glancing through her windshield, her eyes landed on Emily, a young girl in a white dress with meticulously braided hair. A girl like that roaming around at this hour? And that hairstyle looks like it might be gang-related, Samantha muttered, suspicion lacing her tone. After a moment's hesitation, she slowed the car and pulled over. With her headlights beaming directly onto Emily, the girl was forced to halt. Samantha lowered her window, her commanding voice slicing through the quiet night air. "Stop right there. What are you doing out at this hour?" Startled by the abrupt command, Emily clutched the concert program as if it were a shield. "I just finished a piano performance at the Liberty Music Hall," she replied softly yet cautiously. "I live only a few blocks away." But Samantha ignored the explanation. She stepped out of the car with an air of authority, her heavy boots striking the wet pavement as she demanded, "Show me your ID." Her icy gaze swept Emily from head to toe. As a wave of unease overtook her, Emily asked in a calm voice, "May I ask why, ma'am?" "I'm just on my way home. I haven't done anything wrong." Samantha narrowed her eyes, displeased by Emily's composed manner, and replied icily, "Don't try to fool me. That hairstyle don't tell me it isn't linked to gang activity." "Do you really think I'm unaware?" Emily stood frozen, her emotions tightly controlled, but the unfounded accusation hurt her deeply. The very braids her father had so lovingly crafted that morning were now being misinterpreted as a mark of criminality. "My father did this hairstyle for me this morning," she stated steadily, though her voice trembled slightly. "It has nothing to do with gangs." Dissatisfied with the answer, Samantha stepped closer and snatched Emily's bag, silencing any further explanation. "Cooperate or I'll have to take you to the station," she barked, producing a pair of handcuffs. A lump rose in Emily's throat, yet she refused to cry. Clutching the concert program, as if it were her last defense, she stood her ground. As the rain intensified, blurring the image of her white dress and intricate braids, Emily faced a representative of the law who was transforming what should have been a perfect evening into a bitter memory of humiliation. In the distance, the streetlights persisted in their glow, but darkness was encroaching on Emily, foretelling that this encounter was far from over. Samantha grabbed Emily's arm and marched her toward the patrol car. The clinking of cold handcuffs rang sharply in the damp night air. Emily bit her lip and followed, each step a heavy reminder that her dream-filled night was shattering before her eyes. You don't understand. I didn't do anything wrong, Emily insisted, her voice trembling yet firm. Samantha shot back with a cold glare. Silence would be best for you, her lips pressed into a tight line to block any justification. The sound of distant car horns echoed, and the muted glow from nearby houses only deepened the desolation of the scene. Emily's white dress, now drenched, clung to her slender legs, a symbol of a dream broken and a night marred by injustice. Inside the holding cell at the police station, Emily sat on a cold metal chair, her soaked dress clinging to her disheveled frame and her wrists shackled. The harsh fluorescent lights illuminated the stark reality of her predicament, their glare contrasting painfully with the gentle glow outside, a glow that had once heralded her triumphant performance. In that oppressive space, despite the humiliation and fear, Emily's eyes burned with a quiet resolve within them, a determination refused to be snuffed out. Meanwhile, Officer Samantha Brooks, the cop whose biased actions had shattered Emily's perfect evening, sat at her desk in the interrogation room. With a rigid, emotionless expression, she mechanically filled out detention paperwork under the unyielding glare of overhead lights. Every pen stroke, every curt note, underscored a chilling authority that concealed an inner turmoil. "This girl isn't cooperating," she muttered sharply, barely glancing at Emily. Her cold tone clashed with the gentle dignity that still shone in the young girl's eyes, a dignity that had survived the tempest of injustice. Not far away, Officer Mike, a younger and more empathetic colleague, watched the unfolding drama with a furrowed brow and evident hesitation. His soft, concerned voice broke the silence. "Samantha, she's just a student. She doesn't seem involved in any criminal activity." But Samantha cut him off dismissively. "Protocol demands caution. Overlook the slightest detail, and who has to say what she might be part of?" Mike's eyes betrayed his growing discomfort, a discomfort that highlighted the widening gap between rigid procedure and human compassion. As tensions mounted in the sterile confines of the holding area, every minute stretched into an eternity of unspoken questions. The persistent patter of rain against the windows punctuated the silence, each drop marking the relentless passage of time in that dismal cell. The interior of the station, harsh and unyielding, stood in stark contrast to the luminous concert hall where only hours before Emily had basked in applause and admiration. Now, every second served as a reminder of a cruel twist of fate, a night that had stripped her of both pride and peace. Outside the station, concealed in the shadows, a man in a sharp black suit stood silently, his presence as enigmatic as it was ominous. His piercing eyes observed every detail with clinical precision. Clutching a dark umbrella and holding a phone tightly, he had recorded every moment of the encounter. What unfolded before him was not merely a local injustice, it was a spark that could ignite a far-reaching conflagration. The storm outside was not just a meteorological event, but a metaphor for the emotional tempest ignited by Samantha's actions, a storm threatening to upend lives and derail a meticulously planned operation. Back inside, the repercussions of that fateful night began to ripple through the corridors of authority. Captain Robert Mitchell, renowned for his unwavering commitment to justice, arrived in person. His commanding presence filled the room, and his eyes swept over the scene with an intensity that silenced even the faintest murmur. "Brooks!" His voice boomed, cutting through the ambient hum of fluorescent lights and shuffling papers. "Who is this girl you brought in?" In that moment, the air itself grew heavier with impending judgment. Samantha, startled yet trying to maintain her composure, replied coolly, "She's just a girl, Captain. I suspected she was involved in gang activities based on her appearance." But Captain Mitchell's gaze hardened as he pressed on. "What is her name?" His tone combined authority with disbelief. And when Samantha finally answered, "Emily Carter," the room fell into stunned silence. The name resonated with terrible significance. Emily Carter, daughter of Nathan Carter, a top federal agent whose covert operation was critical to dismantling a dangerous criminal network. At the sound of her name, Captain Mitchell's demeanor transformed. His face flushed with anger and disbelief as he bellowed, "Emily Carter? The daughter of Nathan Carter?" His voice trembled with the realization that Samantha's baseless assumptions had endangered not only an innocent child but also a vital national mission. "Nathan Carter is one of our finest agents," he continued, fury evident in every word, "and your actions have given Richard Lawson every reason to doubt his loyalty and jeopardize our mission." The magnitude of Samantha's mistake was laid bare, each word a nail in the coffin of her credibility. Samantha's voice wavered as she tried to justify herself. I was just following protocol," but Captain Mitchell's disappointment brooked no excuse. "Protocol does not grant you the right to humiliate a child," he declared sharply. "Your prejudiced actions have set in motion a chain of events that could have catastrophic consequences for many lives." The room seemed to shrink as the full implications of her error pressed down with crushing force. Every ticking second underscored the irreversible damage a single moment of rash judgment had spiraled into a crisis of monumental proportions. Across town, news of the incident reached Nathan Carter. Clad in a dark, impeccably tailored suit that matched his steely resolve, he made his way to the station with a heart heavy with both paternal worry and professional duty. Each measured step echoed his determination to confront the injustice inflicted upon his daughter and salvage the delicate mission he had painstakingly built. When he finally entered the holding area, his gaze swept over the scene with a blend of anguish and righteous anger. "Emily," he murmured softly, his voice a promise of protection and retribution. "I'm here to make this right." Nathan's arrival brought an undeniable shift. The cold, oppressive station seemed to stir with renewed energy, a silent vow that justice, though delayed, would not be denied. As he approached the cell where Emily was held, his heart broke at the sight of his vulnerable yet unyielding daughter. "Emily," he repeated firmly, "no one will take away your dignity. I promise you, I will fix this." In that moment, the stage was set for a battle not only for personal redemption, but also for the integrity of an entire operation, a battle testing the limits of authority, compassion, and the human spirit. The stark corridors of the station, echoing with the thunder of impending consequences, bore witness to the turning point of that dreadful night. The seeds of prejudice had sown chaos, and the price was measured not only in the tears of an innocent girl, but in the lives of those who had trusted a system meant to protect. Outside, the rain continued its relentless descent, a somber lullaby for the wounded, and weary, a reminder that even in the midst of a storm, a fragile hope awaited nurturing into something stronger and brighter. Meanwhile, amid the chaos following the raid and the stern directives issued by Captain Mitchell, Nathan Carter's urgent call to Officer Samantha Brooks still resonated. In a quiet moment after internal reviews and community outcries, Nathan's voice echoed over the phone with a message that would irreversibly alter events. "Brooks, I need you to do something no one else can." His tone was commanding yet laced with desperation. "Richard Lawson's organization now threatens not only my mission, but countless innocent lives. You must infiltrate their inner circle and earn the trust of Victor King." Samantha listened intently, her mind a swirl of regret, determination, and heavy responsibility. Though still reeling from the fallout of her earlier actions, she recognized this assignment as her final chance at redemption. "I understand, sir," she replied in a measured tone that belied the turmoil within her. "I'll do whatever it takes to mend this mistake and bring Lawson down." The call ended, leaving behind a heavy silence that pulsed in time with her racing heartbeat. Later that evening, Samantha prepared herself for the perilous mission ahead. Determined to shed the rigid persona that had blinded her before, she changed into plain, inconspicuous attire: a worn leather jacket, dark jeans, and boots that had trudged too many long nights on the street. With her hair neatly tied back and her face smoothed of the hardened expression of an officer on duty, she set out into the night. Every step she took was a step away from her old self and toward a chance to rebuild trust with Nathan and the community she once served. Her destination was a seedy bar on the outskirts of town, notorious as a haunt for members of Lawson's organization. The neon sign flickered intermittently, casting erratic shadows over the rain-slicked pavement. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with cigarette smoke, whispered conspiracies, and palpable danger. Samantha's heart pounded as she stepped through the door, determined not to betray any sign of nervousness. She scanned the dim room, seeking someone who might be Victor King, a man reputed to be as unforgiving as a human lie detector. It wasn't long before a rugged figure leaning against the far wall caught her attention. Dressed in an unassuming black jacket and dark sunglasses even indoors, his presence exuded a cold precision. As if sensing her intent, he approached with a deliberate, measured stride. "Who are you?" His low, steady voice exuded skepticism. Meeting his gaze, Samantha projected confidence. "I'm Officer Brooks," she began, carefully choosing her words to sound disillusioned and detached from her former life. "I'm done with the corruption. I want to work with you, help expose the rot from within." The man's eyes narrowed as he scrutinized her face for any sign of deceit. After a long, tense pause, he finally said, "I'm Victor King. Convince me you're not just another cop trying to cover your tracks." Their conversation unfolded in guarded exchanges. Samantha maintained her composure as she recounted a fabricated tale of disillusionment with the system, emphasizing that her actions had led her to renounce a life dictated by rigid protocols and prejudice. Victor's inscrutable demeanor remained as he weighed every syllable. "If you're truly done with the system, prove it," he challenged, his tone carrying both menace and reluctant admiration. "Meet me tomorrow at the abandoned warehouse in downtown. If you're sincere, that's where our paths will truly cross." The next day dawned cold and gray, remnants of the storm still etched in the hazy sky. Fully committed to her undercover assignment, Samantha arrived at the designated location, a dilapidated warehouse with shattered windows and an aura of neglect. Inside, tension charged the air as a small group of Lawson's associates gathered. In the center of the room, amid stacks of crates and murmurs of conspiracies, Victor King stood like a silent sentinel. His reputation for detecting even the slightest falsehood preceded him, and as Samantha entered, the room fell into a hushed silence. "Show me your worth," Victor demanded, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Over several tense hours, Samantha navigated a labyrinth of probing questions and subtle tests. She answered each inquiry with measured honesty, carefully balancing truth with the necessary obfuscation required by her undercover role. As minutes turned to hours, the atmosphere grew increasingly volatile. Every gesture, every glance, carried the weight of lives teetering on the edge, lives that depended on her ability to convince a hardened criminal that she was on his side. Finally, as dusk settled, Victor's skeptical expression softened imperceptibly. "Very well," he said slowly, "you've convinced me for now. But remember, betrayal will be met with consequences you can't imagine." His cold finality sent a shiver down Samantha's spine. The risk was immense, yet she knew this mission was her only path to atonement. With a curt nod, she accepted the perilous task, fully aware that every moment from now on could mean the difference between saving lives and condemning them to chaos. Over the next several days, Samantha immersed herself in her new role, meticulously gathering intelligence on Lawson's operations while maintaining the facade of a disenchanted officer. Each encounter with Victor King and his men was a high-wire act of deception and cautious observation. Behind her calm exterior, Samantha's thoughts churned with memories of the wrongful arrest of Emily, the quiet defiance in the young girl's eyes, and the crushing guilt that had driven her to this moment. Every secret exchanged, every covert gesture was a step toward redemption or utter ruin. The tension peaked on a fateful night when an urgent tip signaled that a major arms shipment was about to be transferred at one of Lawson's hidden facilities. In a clandestine operation coordinated with Nathan's federal team, Samantha was tasked with relaying critical information to enable a synchronized raid. The stakes could not have been higher. As she positioned herself near the loading dock of a deserted industrial complex, the cold night air filled her lungs and sharpened her senses. The distant rumble of engines and murmurs in the dark heralded the chaos about to erupt. Moments later, the silence shattered with the roar of engines and frantic shouts as FBI teams stormed the area, a coordinated assault aimed at crippling Lawson's network once and for all. Amid the ensuing melee, Samantha found herself locked in a dangerous struggle with an armed guard whose eyes shone with lethal resolve. In the scuffle, a flash of metal and a sudden burst of pain, a searing sting along her shoulder, reminded her of the razor-thin line between success and catastrophe. As she staggered back, clutching her injured arm, the cacophony of shouts, gunfire, and the metallic tang of adrenaline filled her ears. Despite the overwhelming danger, Samantha managed to send the crucial signal to Nathan's team, ensuring that the raid would proceed as planned. In that pivotal moment, even as her body protested in pain, her mind was fixed on one thought: redemption. The fierce determination to right the wrongs of the past blazed within her, as fiercely as the flames of the unfolding conflict. The warehouse erupted into chaos, with agents and criminals colliding in a brutal melee, a desperate scramble for control amid a torrent of violence. As the dust settled and the echoes of the raid faded into a tense silence, Samantha, bloodied yet unbowed, was dragged to safety by fellow officers. Though her mind was clouded by pain and exhaustion, she clung to a fragile hope that this mission, this dangerous plunge into the heart of darkness, would finally begin to restore the shattered trust and honor of those whose lives had been jeopardized by her previous misjudgments. In the quiet moments following the chaos, as she sat in the back of an unmarked vehicle, Samantha allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The weight of her past and present actions pressed down on her, yet the promise of a future where she could atone for her errors shimmered on the horizon like a distant beacon. In that lingering silence, with the rain washing away the remnants of the night's violence and the city gradually stirring back to life, Samantha resolved that no matter the cost, she would continue down this treacherous path. The mission was far from over, and every breath she took was a pledge to reclaim not only her own honor, but also the dignity of those she had wronged. After the chaos of the raid subsided, and the echoes of gunfire faded into tense quietude, the aftermath of that fateful night began to reveal its true toll. In the sterile corridors of the hospital, where harsh fluorescent lights battled the lingering gloom of recent violence, Samantha Brooks lay on a narrow bed, her shoulder bandaged and her uniform stained with sweat and blood. Each shallow breath reminded her of the cost of her past mistakes, and of the dangerous mission she had just undertaken. The pain in her body was rivaled only by the turmoil in her mind. Memories of that unjust arrest, the tearful yet defiant look in Emily's eyes rushed back relentlessly. Yet amid the agony, a small spark of determination flickered within her. She vowed that this night, marred by error and regret, would mark the true beginning of redemption, a path where every misstep could be remedied by the choices she made from now on. In a quiet corner of the hospital waiting room, Nathan Carter sat with a stoic expression that barely concealed the anguish of a father whose daughter had suffered so terribly. His call had set off events that now rippled far beyond his personal sphere, threatening to dismantle years of covert work against dangerous criminal networks. Yet in his heart, Nathan clung to the belief that Emily's inner strength would eventually shine through the darkness. When a nurse finally approached with news that Emily's condition was stable and that she would soon be released, a cautious hope began to take root. Nathan's gaze shifted to the sterile wall clock, its measured ticks a solemn reminder that every second mattered in the fight for justice and redemption. Once discharged, Emily returned to a modest apartment where the solitude of her room served as both sanctuary and battleground for her emotions. The damp, crumpled concert program, a cherished memento of her triumphant performance, rested on a small table beside a window that framed a rain-washed cityscape. As she sat there, the memories of that humiliating night intertwined with the echo of applause from the concert hall, composing a bittersweet symphony of loss and hope. Determined not to let the injustice define her, Emily began to compose a new melody on her aging piano. Each note emerged tentatively at first, but soon her fingers grew bolder, painting a musical portrait of resilience that transcended past pain. In that quiet interplay of sound and emotion, she discovered a language that spoke directly to her wounded soul, a language destined to become her testament to the power of healing through art. Not far from the hospital, the ripple effects of that tragic night had already begun to morph into a broader movement. Community leaders and activists, galvanized by the shocking revelations of police misconduct, organized town hall meetings and public forums demanding accountability and systemic reform. In one such gathering at a local community center, voices from all walks of life united in a fervent call for change. Amid impassioned speeches and tearful testimonies, a sense of shared responsibility emerged. It was clear that the incident was not isolated to one misguided officer. It was symptomatic of deeper, long-entrenched biases that had to be confronted head-on. As citizens demanded transparency and justice, new initiatives were launched to overhaul training programs, rebuild public trust, and ensure that no innocent soul would ever again suffer from prejudice. In the days that followed, a poignant documentary titled A Voice Beyond the Silence, chronicling the intertwined journeys of Emily Carter and Samantha Brooks, struck a powerful chord nationwide. Its unflinching portrayal of loss, resilience, and the possibility of redemption spurred countless conversations about justice, accountability, and personal transformation. Letters poured in from people of all ages, many of whom found in Emily's music and Samantha's heartfelt confessions a reflection of their own struggles. In classrooms, living rooms, and online communities, discussions blossomed on how to bridge divides, heal old wounds, and build a future where compassion triumphed over prejudice. In the final analysis, the lives of Emily, Samantha, and Nathan became emblematic of a broader truth, that from the depths of despair, people can rise, rebuild, and redefine themselves. Their journeys were not neatly resolved. Instead, they continued as dynamic quests for justice and self-improvement. Even as challenges remained and the road ahead promised to be long and arduous, there was a palpable sense of hope, a conviction that the mistakes of the past could serve as the foundation for a brighter future. The legacy of that turbulent night, once a symbol of injustice and cruelty, had been recast into a powerful narrative of redemption, resilience, and the unyielding power of forgiveness. In the quiet moments before dawn, as the city's clamor softened to a gentle murmur, each soul touched by pain yet emboldened by the possibility of change reflected on the paths they had walked. They understood that while scars might never fully fade, they could serve as enduring reminders of the strength required to overcome adversity. And as the first light of a new day broke over the horizon, it carried with it the promise of renewal, a promise that even the most fractured lives could, through struggle and solidarity, be pieced back together into something beautiful, meaningful, and everlasting. In the days following the tumultuous raid and the subsequent public outcry, the city embarked on a slow, painful journey of healing. The wounds of injustice were still raw, yet amid the ruins of broken trust and tarnished authority, a resolute determination for reform and renewal emerged. Nathan Carter, steadfast in his duty as both a federal agent and a protective father, spearheaded efforts to restore the integrity of the covert mission. Late-night meetings in quiet conference rooms were held, where detailed plans were drafted to fortify procedures and eradicate biases that had, until now, festered in the shadows of the system. His measured, resolute voice echoed in those rooms as he reminded his team that every detail mattered. Lives at stake demanded nothing less than perfection. In his eyes burned the memory of Emily's brave, defiant gaze, a vision that propelled him forward even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Meanwhile, Emily, whose spirit had been so callously tarnished on that fateful night, discovered solace in the transformative power of music. Each time she sat at her piano, the instrument became more than just wood and keys. It became her confessional, her sanctuary, her declaration of survival. In her modest apartment, accompanied only by the soft hum of the city, she composed melodies that intertwined threads of sorrow, defiance, and hope. Every note carried the weight of past pain yet promised a reclaimed future. As her music blossomed, invitations flowed in from local community centers, intimate recitals, and regional concert halls. With every performance, Emily felt the chains of humiliation break, replaced by a quiet, unyielding strength. Her compositions, raw and honest, resonated with audiences who once felt voiceless, inspiring many to find beauty even in brokenness. Officer Samantha Brooks's journey was equally transformative, marked by the heavy burden of regret and a relentless pursuit of redemption. After the disastrous events at the station, she spent long nights alone, revisiting the mistakes that had cost an innocent girl her dignity. In those solitary hours, she began writing letters, apologies addressed not only to Emily, but to every soul affected by her biased actions. With each carefully chosen word, she attempted to dismantle the prejudices that had long governed her judgments. The path to self-forgiveness was fraught with remnants of old habits and toxic doctrines. Yet over time, Samantha took bold steps toward reform. She sought counseling, attended empathy training workshops, and even spoke at public forums about the dangers of unchecked authority and the importance of introspection. Her transformation was gradual, punctuated by sincere apologies and tangible acts of restitution. As she later worked with at-risk youth at a local community center, Samantha discovered that sharing her story, the bitter lessons, and hard-won insights could break down long-held barriers, fostering an environment where young people felt truly seen and valued. In community meetings held under the warm glow of public hall lights, citizens united in a chorus demanding accountability and systemic change. They shared personal tales of injustice, loss, and resilience. Together, they pressed local officials to revise outdated policies and implement stringent oversight of law enforcement practices. Activists organized rallies, petition drives, and educational workshops aimed at dismantling deep-seated stereotypes and nurturing a culture that honored every individual's worth. These gatherings, often in modest town halls and repurposed community centers, became symbols of a collective rebirth, a declaration that no one should suffer under prejudice and that every person deserved recognition for who they truly were. As weeks turned into months, the ripple effects of that agonizing night spread even further. The documentary A Voice Beyond the Silence, which captured the intertwined journeys of Emily Carter and Samantha Brooks, resonated powerfully across the nation. Its stark portrayal of loss, resilience, and the possibility of redemption sparked countless conversations about justice, accountability, and personal growth. Letters flooded in from people of every age, many of whom saw in Emily's music and Samantha's candid confessions reflections of their own struggles. In classrooms, living rooms, and online communities, discussions flourished on how to bridge divides, heal old wounds, and forge a future where compassion would triumph over prejudice. Ultimately, the lives of Emily, Samantha, and Nathan came to symbolize a broader truth, that even from the depths of despair, individuals can rise, rebuild, and redefine themselves. Their journeys were not neatly concluded. Instead, they continued as dynamic quests for justice and self-improvement. Even as challenges persisted, and the road ahead promised to be long and arduous, a palpable sense of hope endured, a conviction that the mistakes of the past could be transformed into the foundation for a brighter future. The legacy of that turbulent night, once emblematic of injustice and cruelty, had been reshaped into a powerful narrative of redemption, resilience, and the unyielding power of forgiveness. In the quiet moments before dawn, when the city's clamor softened to a gentle murmur, each of these souls, scarred yet emboldened by the possibility of change, reflected on the paths they had trodden. They recognized that while scars might never fully vanish, they could serve as reminders of the strength required to overcome adversity. And as the first light of a new day broke over the horizon, it carried with it the promise of renewal, a promise that even the most fractured lives could, through struggle and solidarity, be pieced back together into something beautiful, meaningful, and enduring. It had been 10 long years since that unforgettable night on Oak Street, a night that had shattered the innocence of a young girl and forever altered her destiny. In the years that followed, Emily Carter transformed her pain into purpose. No longer was she the frightened child in a white dress with carefully woven braids. She had emerged as a brilliant, determined attorney, one whose every case was a testament to her resilience and her unyielding belief in redemption. Now, standing at the apex of her career, Emily prepared to take on a case that would force her to confront the very embodiment of her painful past. Samantha Brooks, the officer whose callous actions had once humiliated her, now seeking vindication after becoming ensnared in a web of political deceit. On a crisp fall afternoon in downtown Chicago, the city pulsed with vibrant energy. The sidewalks teemed with people, and the kaleidoscope of autumn leaves danced in the breeze. Outside the towering glass building of Carter Associates, the autumn sun cast long shadows across the busy street as pedestrians hurried along, their conversations merging with the distant sounds of honking horns and city life. Inside, Emily's office was a sanctuary of order and quiet intensity. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves crammed with legal volumes, framed newspaper clippings of past victories, and personal mementos from a turbulent journey decorated the room. A large mahogany desk stood at the center, strewn with case files, notebooks, and a well-worn photograph of a much younger Emily, a reminder of how far she had come. Emily sat at her desk, her gaze fixed on a meticulously annotated folder labeled Brooks' case. The folder contained every scrap of evidence, witness statements, internal memos, and confidential documents that could help unearth the truth behind Samantha Brooks' tarnished reputation. As she flipped through the pages, her mind wandered back to that dark night, so long ago, the night that had ignited in her a burning need for justice. It was a memory laced with sorrow and determination, a memory that had shaped her understanding of power, authority, and redemption. A soft knock on the open door broke her reverie. "Come in," she called, her voice calm yet tinged with anticipation. The door opened slowly, and a young associate, Marcus, stepped inside. His eyes were bright with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Miss Carter, the preliminary interviews have wrapped up," he said, handing her a thick stack of typed transcripts. "The witnesses are ready to talk about what they saw, about how the internal memos were manipulated." "It's all here." Emily took the documents with a nod. "Thank you, Marcus. This is our opportunity to set the record straight," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to disturb the solemn air that enveloped her memories. Later that evening, as dusk draped the city in hues of indigo and gold, Emily walked the polished corridors of the courthouse, her steps echoing softly. The grandeur of the building, a testament to decades of judicial history, seemed to whisper secrets of justice and sorrow in equal measure. The courthouse's marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of ornate chandeliers, and every detail, from the carved wood panels to the polished brass fixtures, evoked a sense of reverence and expectation. Inside the courtroom, tension simmered as spectators, journalists, and members of the press filled the seats. The atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation over a case that promised not only legal repercussions, but a broader commentary on the nature of power, redemption, and the possibility of transformation. Samantha Brooks sat at the defendant's table, her once steely gaze now softened by the weight of years and regret. The transformation was evident to anyone who looked. The hard lines of a woman once hardened by duty had given way to a vulnerable, thoughtful expression, one that hinted at the internal battle between pride and remorse. The judge called the court to order. Emily rose, adjusting her tailored navy suit and gathering her notes. In that moment, as she walked to the defense table, every eye in the courtroom turned toward her, a woman whose own story was intertwined with the very heart of the trial. With a deep breath, she began her opening statement. "Your Honor, esteemed members of the jury," Emily began, her voice resonant and clear, "we stand here today not to simply assign blame, but to explore a deeper truth about the capacity for change within each of us. The case before you is not merely about an officer's actions on a long past night, it is about the betrayal of trust and the failure of a system to acknowledge that even those tasked with enforcing the law are capable of being manipulated, misrepresented, and ultimately redeemed." Her eyes swept the room as she continued, "I grew up with the memory of that terrible night, a night when injustice robbed me of my dignity. But it is also true that out of that crucible of pain, I emerged with a steadfast belief that justice, when tempered with compassion, can heal even the deepest wounds. Today, I ask you to look beyond the surface and see the complexities of the truth that Officer Brooks is not simply the villain of our past, but a victim of an insidious political conspiracy designed to strip her of her rights and her honor." A murmur ran through the courtroom as Emily's words resonated with a mix of empathy and determination. The prosecuting attorney, a sharp-minded woman named Denise Reed, stood to deliver her rebuttal. "Miss Carter," Denise began coolly, "while your personal history may move you, this is not a trial of sentiment. It is a trial of facts. The evidence clearly demonstrates that Officer Brooks overstepped her bounds on that fateful night, and the manipulations you allege are hardly sufficient to erase her responsibility." A heated exchange of words began, with Denise quoting documents and pointing out discrepancies in witness accounts. But Emily remained poised, interjecting with calm, measured counterpoints. "The discrepancies you mention," she replied, "are not errors, they are the deliberate distortions wrought by those who sought to silence the truth. When the very people entrusted with upholding justice manipulate evidence to suit their ends, no one is truly innocent. Our duty is to restore honor to the truth and to the individuals, who have been wronged by it. Throughout the trial, Emily's cross-examinations were a master class in both legal strategy and empathetic dialogue. During one testimony, a former detective, his voice quavering with a memory of long-forgotten details, recounted the day he discovered that key evidence had been altered. "I remember the shock," he said, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It was as if the very foundation of our system was crumbling before my eyes. I couldn't believe that the files had been tampered with." Emily leaned forward, her tone softening. "And what did you do then?" she asked gently, inviting him to share not just facts, but the emotional turmoil he had experienced. "I reported it," the detective replied, his voice steadier now, but nothing changed. "I felt betrayed by a system that was supposed to protect us." That moment of raw honesty resonated deeply with the jury. Emily's follow-up was quiet but forceful. Is it any wonder, then, that an officer like Samantha Brooks found herself caught in a labyrinth of internal betrayal? If those sworn to protect can become the victims of political maneuvering, what hope is there for any of us? The courtroom fell into reflective silence. Outside, as the trial continued over days, public opinion began to shift. Journalists revisited old footage and interviewed community members who recalled that long-ago night on Oak Street. In quiet cafes and busy newsrooms alike, conversations turned to the possibility of redemption and the complex interplay between personal responsibility and institutional failure. Late one rainy evening, after another grueling day in court, Emily sat in a quiet corner of the courthouse library. The soft patter of rain against the tall windows created a cocoon of introspection. A familiar voice interrupted her reverie. "Miss Carter?" It was Samantha Brooks, hesitantly approaching. Her eyes, once guarded and hard, now bore the marks of remorse and longing for understanding. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Emily looked up, her expression unreadable for a brief heartbeat before softening with recognition. "Of course, Officer Brooks," she said. "Please join me." They sat side by side at a long wooden table, illuminated by a solitary lamp. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Samantha began, her voice trembling slightly. "I never imagined that this day would come. I spent so many years believing I was beyond redemption, that I had become the villain in everyone's eyes." Emily regarded her with compassionate understanding. "I too was once defined by that night," she admitted quietly. "I know what it feels like to be haunted by memories of injustice. But the truth is, our past does not have to imprison us. It can be the fuel for our transformation." A tear glistened in Samantha's eye. "How did you do it, Emily? How did you find the strength to forgive and to rebuild your life?" Emily's gaze grew distant as she recalled her own struggles. "It wasn't easy. Every day, I fought with the memory of what happened to me. But I realized that holding on to anger only deepened the wounds. I chose instead to channel that pain into a commitment to justice, not just for myself, but for all those who have been wronged. I believe that forgiveness is not forgetting, but understanding that every human being has the capacity for change." Samantha nodded slowly, the weight of her confession mingling with a spark of hope. "I want to believe that too," she whispered. "I want to reclaim my honor, to show that I am more than the sum of my mistakes." Their conversation, intimate and raw, marked a turning point. The next day, as the trial resumed, Emily's closing argument was a powerful tapestry woven with both legal acumen and personal vulnerability. Standing before the jury, she spoke with the passion of someone who had known deep sorrow and emerged stronger for it. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "what you have witnessed in this courtroom is not merely a legal battle over a tarnished record. It is a struggle for the very soul of our justice system. Samantha Brooks, despite the grievous errors of our past, stands before you as a woman who has been betrayed by those she once trusted. She is not asking for your pity, but for your understanding. She is asking for a chance to rebuild her life and, in doing so, to help heal a system that has too often let us down. Her voice resonated with a quiet intensity. I grew up believing that justice was a cold, unyielding force. But I have learned that justice can be compassionate, that it can acknowledge the complexities of the human spirit. Samantha's journey is one of transformation, one that reminds us that even in our darkest moments, there is the potential for redemption. I urge you to look beyond the missteps of the past and see the person who stands before you today, a person who is ready to embrace a future defined not by guilt, but by the promise of renewal. As she finished, the courtroom was steeped in a heavy silence. The jury's deliberations were long and measured, each member reflecting on the intricacies of the case and the profound humanity behind the legal arguments. Hours later, as the jury filed back into the courtroom, the atmosphere was palpable with anticipation. When the verdict was read that Samantha Brooks was vindicated and that substantial compensation would be awarded as a means to restore her honor, the room erupted in a mix of quiet weeping and subdued applause. Samantha's eyes, red from the strain of years of shame and isolation, filled with a tentative smile of relief and gratitude. Emily, standing in the back of the courtroom, allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. In that instant, she knew that her own long journey from victim to victor had not been in vain. Outside the courthouse, under a sky cleared of its earlier gloom, reporters clamored for interviews. The headlines in the next morning's papers read, "Redemption Realized, the trial that rewrote a life and from tragedy to triumph, Emily Carter's journey of justice." But amid the accolades and public attention, Emily remained measured and reflective. That evening, in the quiet privacy of her home, a modest apartment filled with mementos of her journey, Emily prepared to address a small gathering of close friends, colleagues, and community advocates. The room was softly lit, with candles flickering on a long table set for dinner. As guests mingled and soft jazz played in the background, Emily took a moment to speak from the heart. "I stand before you," she said, her voice steady yet imbued with emotion, "not as a flawless hero, but as someone who has learned that the path to justice is lined with our scars. Each of us has faced moments of darkness, moments when it seemed that the weight of our past would forever hold us captive. But today, I choose to see those scars as the very proof of our strength. They remind us that we have survived, and that survival is the first step toward healing." The guests listened intently, many nodding in silent agreement. A friend from law school, now a social worker, approached Emily afterward. "You've changed so many lives," she said softly. "Your story has inspired me to believe that even those who have been broken can find a way to mend." Emily smiled warmly. "We all have that power within us," she replied. "Sometimes, it just takes a little faith and a willingness to forgive to unlock it." In the months that followed the verdict, Emily and Samantha forged an unexpected alliance. They began to meet regularly to discuss ways to reform the system that had once betrayed them both. Their conversations, held over coffee in small cafes and in quiet corners of public libraries, often delved into the nuances of human behavior, institutional corruption, and the delicate art of forgiveness. One rainy afternoon, as they sat by a fogged-up window in a downtown diner, Samantha confided, "For so long, I felt defined by the mistakes of that night. I thought that I would never be able to escape the label that was forced upon me. But now, working with you, I'm beginning to see that perhaps there is more to my story than just that one moment." Emily reached across the table, placing her hand gently over Samantha's. "Your past does not have to dictate your future," she said softly. "We have both been shaped by our experiences, but it's our choices now that define us. Together, we can create a narrative that speaks not of shame, but of resilience and hope. Their collaboration soon extended beyond personal conversations. They co-authored articles and hosted public forums on justice reform, drawing large crowds of community members hungry for change. At one such forum held in a refurbished community center, Emily addressed a diverse audience of activists, legal professionals, and everyday citizens. The room buzzed with anticipation as she recounted the story of that fateful night on Oak Street, not as a tale of victimization, but as a catalyst for profound transformation. Every day, we are faced with choices, Emily declared, her voice ringing with conviction. We can choose to allow our past to confine us, or we can choose to rise above it. Samantha's story is not one of irreversible failure. It is a story of how even the most painful moments can be transformed into opportunities for growth and renewal. Let us not allow the mistakes of yesterday to rob us of the promise of tomorrow. Her words were met with heartfelt applause, and many in the audience approached her afterward, sharing their own stories of struggle and triumph. In those moments, Emily realized that the case had grown far beyond the courtroom. It had become a movement, a beacon of hope for those who believed that justice could be redefined. As winter gave way to spring, the city began to blossom with new energy. Emily's reputation as a fierce advocate for justice continued to grow, and she found herself invited to speak at universities and legal conferences across the nation. Each time she spoke, her message was consistent, that our scars, though reminders of past pain, could also be the foundation upon which a better future is built. One evening, after a long day of meetings and panel discussions, Emily walked along a tree-lined boulevard, the soft glow of streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. The cool night air was invigorating, and as she strolled, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The echoes of laughter from a nearby cafe mingled with the distant hum of traffic, and she felt a profound connection to the city around her, a city that, like her, had learned to overcome its own scars. In the days that followed, a new initiative was launched, a legal aid fund dedicated to helping victims of systemic injustice rebuild their lives. Emily was invited to help lead the project, a role that she accepted with humility and determination. At the inaugural event, held in a renovated warehouse-turned-community center, she took the stage before a crowd of impassioned supporters. Today, she said, we celebrate not just a legal victory, but the triumph of human spirit over the forces of indifference and corruption. This fund represents our collective belief that every person, no matter how deeply wounded, deserves a chance at justice and a future filled with promise. The audience erupted into applause, and many approached her afterward with tearful thanks and stories of their own struggles. It was in these moments that Emily felt the full weight of her journey, a journey that had begun with a single, painful night and had evolved into a mission to redefine justice for an entire community. Standing on the steps of the courthouse on a bright spring morning, Emily watched as the city stirred awake. The promise of a new day, filled with endless possibilities, was palpable. The memory of that long-ago night on Oak Street no longer haunted her. Instead, it served as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is the potential for light. And as she looked out over the bustling streets, she knew that her work was far from over, that every life she touched, every injustice she fought, was a step toward a more compassionate, just world. In that moment of quiet introspection, Emily Carter smiled. She had come a long way from the terrified little girl whose dignity had been stolen so many years ago. Now, as a respected attorney, a mentor, and an advocate for reform, she embodied the very principles of redemption and resilience. And while the scars of the past might never fully fade, they had become symbols of the strength it takes to overcome adversity and the power of forgiveness to heal even the deepest wounds. As dusk settled over the city, Emily returned to her modest apartment, where the soft light of a desk lamp illuminated a wall adorned with photographs of family, friends, and moments of triumph. Sitting down at her desk, she opened her journal, a repository for her thoughts, reflections, and dreams for the future. With each stroke of her pen, she poured out the emotions of the day, the triumphs in court, the heartfelt conversations with Samantha Brooks, and the quiet moments of solitude that had allowed her to find peace amid the chaos. In her writing, she captured not only the facts of a hard-fought trial, but the very essence of what it meant to be human, to rise above pain, to forgive, and to rebuild. Looking back on the journey that had brought her to this point, Emily realized that her story was not unique. It was the story of every individual who had ever suffered under the weight of injustice, and yet dared to dream of a better tomorrow. And as she closed her journal that night, she made a silent promise that she would continue to fight for the truth, for justice, and for the redemption of every soul left behind by a broken system. In the quiet hours before dawn, as the city slept and a gentle stillness reigned, Emily Carter's heart was filled with hope, a hope that even the deepest wounds could be healed, and that every life, no matter how scarred, held within it the power to transform the world. This story teaches us that even the darkest moments of injustice can spark profound transformation. It reminds us that every individual has the capacity to learn from their mistakes, embrace change, and grow stronger through adversity. The narrative shows that resilience, redemption, and forgiveness are not merely lofty ideals, they are practical tools that empower us to overcome prejudice and rebuild our lives. Ultimately, the story inspires us to confront our own biases, stand up for what is right, and extend compassion both to ourselves and to others. In a world often marred by division, let our commitment to empathy and accountability light the way toward healing and a more just future.